I realized my children hated me the moment I heard them discussing when it would be most profitable for me to die. They weren't angry. They weren't drunk. They weren't joking. They were calm, careful, and they weren't asking if. They were deciding when. I realized my children hated me the night I heard them discussing when it would be most profitable for me to die. Not if, when. They spoke quietly, the way people do when they don't want to wake a sleeping child, or when they assume the person on the other side of the wall no longer matters. I had gone to bed early that night, or at least I thought I had. My memory of the evening is soft around the edges, like something handled too many times. I remember the taste of chamomile tea. I remember the ticking of the clock in the hallway. I remember thinking, briefly, that the house felt unusually alive, doors opening and closing, footsteps that paused too long outside my room. Then I woke up. Or maybe I never fell asleep. Their voices came through the wall, clear enough that I could distinguish tone, but not loud enough to feel careless. Measured, controlled, adult. My daughter spoke first. If it's before December, the tax situation is cleaner. My son answered without hesitation. But the insurance matures in March. That's a significant difference. There was a pause, the kind that implies calculation. And optics? My daughter asked. If it's too soon after the paperwork, people might ask questions. My son exhaled. I could hear the faint smile in his voice. No one asks questions when a man his age gets tired. I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling, my body frozen in a way that felt instinctual rather than deliberate. I counted my breaths the way I used to when I was young and afraid of thunderstorms. 1, 2, 3, don't move. For several seconds, my mind refused to assign meaning to the words. It treated them as sounds only, neutral vibrations passing through drywall. This had to be about someone else, a client, a hypothetical, a joke in poor taste. Then my name entered the conversation. Not spoken loudly, not even fully, just the familiar shorthand they used when referring to me between themselves. He's been more confused lately. That helps. My son replied without hesitation. The doctor already noted mild cognitive decline. That gives us cover. Cover. I pressed my palm into the mattress, anchoring myself to the room. The smell of laundry detergent, the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Reality. I needed reality. They weren't angry. That was the worst part. There was no resentment in their voices, no bitterness, just efficiency, like coworkers finalizing a timeline. We should let him believe it's his idea. That way it's cleaner, less resistance. My son agreed. He trusts us, or at least he wants to. Their footsteps moved away from the wall. A door closed. The house returned to silence. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. Morning arrived as if nothing had happened. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows. The coffee machine gurgled. Toast popped up, slightly burnt. My son had never learned to adjust the setting. Ordinary details, comforting details. I clung to them desperately, like proof that the night had been a misunderstanding. My daughter smiled at me when I entered the room. "Morning, Dad. You're up early." Her voice was warm, concerned. She poured coffee into my favorite mug without asking, just the way my wife used to. I studied her face for signs of guilt, malice, anything that would confirm what I'd heard. There was nothing, just familiar lines, familiar eyes. My son glanced up from his phone. "Sleep okay?" The question landed heavily. I wondered if it was a test. "Fine," I said. My voice sounded normal to my own ears. That scared me more than if it hadn't. They exchanged a look, quick, subtle, practiced. "You sure?" my daughter asked gently. "You seemed restless last night." My heart stuttered. "I woke up once, thought I heard voices." Both of them laughed. "Old house, the pipes make weird sounds." My daughter touched my arm. "You've been stressed lately. That happens." Stress, confusion, fatigue. Words with soft edges. words that explained everything without accusing anyone. I nodded, unsure what else to do. They had moved back in 6 months ago after my retirement. It had felt sudden at the time, but also comforting. My wife had been gone for 3 years. The house was too big, too quiet. They said they wanted to help. At first, the help was small. Managing bills, scheduling appointments, reminding me to take my medication. "You've earned rest," my daughter told me. "Let us worry." I let them. Why wouldn't I? They were my children. The first thing I noticed after the conversation was how often I doubted myself. I reached for my pills one morning and found the bottles rearranged. "I switched them," I said, trying to keep my tone light. My son frowned. "No, Dad, they've always been that way." I was sure they hadn't. Had they? Later, I checked my bank account and saw a transfer I didn't remember authorizing. "You signed it last week," my daughter said calmly. "We talked about it." We hadn't. Had we? She showed me the document. My signature was there, shaky but unmistakably mine. I felt embarrassed for accusing them. "I must have forgotten," I said. "That's okay. That's why we're here." That night, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection, searching for cracks, signs of decline, something that would explain how easily my certainty slipped through my fingers. My father had lost his memory near the end. I remember how frustrated he was, how angry, how convinced everyone was conspiring against him. I promised myself I wouldn't become that man. The doctor's appointment came a week later. I don't remember scheduling it. The doctor was kind, professional. He spoke slowly, as if addressing a child or someone hard of hearing. "Mild cognitive impairment," he said. "Nothing alarming at this stage." My daughter squeezed my hand. "See, we caught it early." The doctor asked me questions, dates, names, simple patterns. I answered most of them correctly. Most. "That happens," he said when I hesitated. "Fatigue can worsen symptoms." Symptoms. He adjusted my medication. When we got home, my son suggested I rest. "You've had a long day." I lay down in my room, the same room where I heard them plan my future like a budget spreadsheet. I stared at the wall, half expecting voices to seep through again. They didn't. Instead, doubt crept in. What if I misunderstood? What if my mind had filled in gaps that weren't there? What if the conversation had been about estate planning, hypotheticals, a joke in poor taste? By evening, I almost convinced myself it had been nothing. Almost. The doubt shattered 2 nights later. I woke to the sound of my name again. This time, I didn't move. My son was speaking. "If he resists, we slow it down." My daughter replied, "He won't. He wants to be useful." A pause.
"And if he remembers?" my son asked. There was silence long enough to feel intentional. Then my daughter said, "He already doubts himself, that's the point." My throat tightened. They weren't planning my death. They were planning my consent. The realization was worse than any violent scenario my mind had imagined. They didn't want blood on their hands. They wanted me to step aside willingly, to sign myself away, to disappear politely. I felt something break inside me then, not loudly, not all at once, just a quiet fracture. I understood the rules. If I confronted them, they would deny everything. If I accused them, they would prove I was confused. If I fought, they would slow down and adjust. The house was no longer my home. It was a system, and I was the variable being managed. I rolled onto my side, facing the wall, and let my breathing even out. I became the version of myself they expected, compliant, tired, unsure. Because if they believed I was losing myself, then they wouldn't notice when I started watching them. I began keeping notes, not because I trusted paper more than my mind, but because I no longer trusted my mind at all. At first, the notes were simple: dates, times, small observations. Monday, pills tasted different. Wednesday, daughter answered my phone while I was asleep. Friday, daughter corrected a story I remember clearly. I hid the notebook inside an old winter coat in the closet, somewhere they wouldn't think to look, somewhere forgotten, like me. The act of writing steadied me. It gave shape to my fear, but it also revealed something worse. The entries contradicted each other. I would read something I had written only days earlier and feel nothing, no recognition, no emotional echo, just ink on paper describing a version of myself I couldn't fully inhabit. Sometimes I disagreed with my own words. This doesn't sound like me, I thought more than once. That scared me more than the conversations. They adjusted my routine gradually. Breakfast at the same time every morning, walks at the same hour, television programs chosen to help with cognition. Consistency helps, my daughter said. I noticed how often she used that phrase. My son took over driving, claimed I'd been drifting between lanes. I don't remember that, I said. He smiled patiently. That's the problem, Dad. They never raised their voices, never rushed me, never forced anything. They guided. The more I resisted internally, the more accommodating they became externally. It was like being smothered with politeness. One afternoon, I tried something reckless. I moved my notebook. Just a few inches, from the coat pocket to beneath the mattress. The next morning, it was gone. I searched quietly, carefully, every drawer, every shelf. Nothing. At breakfast, my daughter placed a hand on my shoulder. You seem anxious lately, she said. Did you misplace something? I stared at her, searching for any sign that this was a game. Her eyes were calm, concerned. No, I said finally, just tired. She smiled. That's what we thought. I started questioning my memories more aggressively. I would replay moments in my head, searching for seams, for distortions. The night of the first conversation, was I fully awake? Had I been dreaming? Had medication blurred the edges? I checked the prescription bottles. They didn't match what I remembered. When I asked, my son produced a printout from the pharmacy. Dates, dosages, all correct. See, he said gently, you just forgot. Forgot. That word followed me everywhere. I forgot conversations, forgot appointments, forgot promises I was accused of breaking. And yet, I remembered fear. Perfectly. It never dulled, never softened. It only sharpened. Fear doesn't need consistency. It just needs repetition. One evening, a woman knocked on the door. She introduced herself as a social worker. Just a routine visit, she said brightly. We sat in the living room, my children perched on either side of me like bookends. She asked questions. How was my sleep? Did I feel safe? Did I ever feel confused or disoriented? I answered carefully. My daughter corrected me when I hesitated. He's been struggling with dates, she said apologetically. It frustrates him. The social worker nodded sympathetically. That's very common. She turned back to me. And how do you feel about your children helping you manage things? I wanted to say trapped. Instead, I said grateful. The word tasted wrong, but the alternative felt dangerous. After she left, my son clapped me lightly on the shoulder. You did great, he said. Great, as if this were an exam I'd passed. That night, I dreamed I was standing in my own house while strangers labeled the furniture, measuring walls, discussing resale value. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. I woke up with my heart pounding and couldn't remember my wife's face. That was the first thing I truly lost. Her face had always been clear to me, even after her death, especially after. But that morning, when I tried to picture her, all I saw was an outline, a placeholder where something precious had been. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried silently. Later, my daughter noticed my red eyes. "Bad dreams?" she asked. I nodded. She hugged me tightly. "We're here," she whispered. "You don't have to hold on to everything alone." Her words were kind. Her timing was perfect. I tried reaching out to an old friend, someone from before, someone untouched. My phone didn't have his number anymore. When I asked, my son frowned. "You asked us to remove some contacts," he said. "You said they were confusing you." I didn't argue. I couldn't be sure. That uncertainty became the cage. Any accusation I formed dissolved under scrutiny. Any certainty crumbled when examined. I began to understand the elegance of their approach. They weren't erasing my memory. They were erasing my confidence in it. Another appointment, another doctor. This one spoke more firmly. "Progression is still mild, but denial can worsen outcomes." My daughter nodded solemnly. "He's been resistant," she said. "We're worried." The doctor looked at me with practiced empathy. Sometimes accepting help is the hardest part. I wanted to scream. Instead, I agreed to an adjustment in treatment. More pills, different pills. That night, my thoughts felt heavier, slower, as if moving through syrup. I tried to recall the exact words I'd overheard weeks earlier. They slipped away from me. Phrases blurred. Certainty softened. Only the feeling remained. Cold, precise, intentional. I tested them again, subtly. At dinner, I said, "You know, I heard something strange a while back. Thought I heard you talking about me." They both froze, just for a fraction of a second. Then my daughter laughed softly. "Oh, Dad," she said, "you told us about that already." I frowned. "Did I?" "Yes," my son added. "It really upset you. The doctor said it was probably a stress dream." A stress dream. I searched their faces.
They looked genuinely concerned, embarrassed even. I felt ashamed. "Sorry," I muttered. They reassured me immediately, too quickly. Later that night, I stood in the hallway outside my room, listening. Their voices drifted through the wall again, lower now, more cautious. "He's testing us," my son said. "I know," my daughter replied. "We need to accelerate." My hands shook. Accelerate. The word echoed long after the house went quiet. The next morning, they presented me with documents. "Just precautionary," my daughter said. "Temporary. Power of attorney, medical directives. You don't have to sign today," my son added. But they placed the pen in my hand anyway. I stared at the paper. The letters swam. This was the moment. I knew it with a clarity that cut through the fog. If I signed, it would be over. Not immediately, not dramatically, but completely. I looked up. "I want to think about it," I said. They exchanged another glance. This one wasn't hidden. This one was annoyed. "Of course," my daughter said after a beat. "Take your time." But something had shifted. The air felt tighter. The system had detected resistance. That night, I found a new pill added to my organizer. I didn't ask about it. Instead, I pretended to swallow it and hid it under my tongue. Later, alone in the bathroom, I examined it under the light. I didn't recognize the name. I flushed it. For the first time in weeks, I felt alert, clear. Anger rose, not explosive, but focused. They thought I was fading. They thought I was compliant. They were wrong about one thing. I still remembered how to wait. And waiting, I realized, was the only move left to me. I did not sleep that night, not because of fear. Fear had become familiar, but because clarity had returned, sharp and unsettling. Without the pill's fog, my thoughts aligned too cleanly. Patterns emerged, timelines locked into place. They weren't rushing because I wasn't deteriorating. They were rushing because I wasn't. Morning came with unusual cheer. My daughter hummed as she prepared breakfast. My son spoke about weather forecasts and traffic, mundane details offered like camouflage. I played my role.
I smiled when prompted. I asked questions I already knew the answers to. I thanked them for their patience. They relaxed. That was the moment I understood how fragile their control truly was. It depended entirely on my performance. After breakfast, my daughter suggested a walk. Fresh air helps cognition, she said. I agreed. Outside, the neighborhood looked unchanged. Lawns trimmed, cars parked where they always had been. A man waved at us from across the street. I didn't recognize him. He seemed to know me. As we walked, my daughter linked her arm through mine. "You know we love you," she said softly. "I know," I replied. And I did. Or at least I knew they believed they did. Love, I realized, was no longer a useful metric. It could justify anything if framed correctly. That afternoon, they scheduled another meeting. This time, a lawyer joined via video call. "Just to explain options," my son said. The lawyer spoke in careful, neutral tones. Words like autonomy, safeguards, best interests floated through the room. I nodded at appropriate moments. When the call ended, the documents reappeared. My daughter slid them toward me. "No pressure," she said. "Only when you're ready." The pen rested beside the paper. I picked it up. My hand did not shake. I don't remember exactly when I decided. Not a single moment, more like a gradual acceptance that resistance required proof, and proof required memory I could no longer defend. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but who would believe me? A man with documented cognitive decline accusing his children of a conspiracy that left no marks, no bruises, no threats? They had built something airtight. And maybe, this thought crept in uninvited, they weren't entirely wrong. I had forgotten things, lost details, missed cues. What if this was simply care? That was the most dangerous thought of all, because it almost convinced me. That evening, I asked my daughter a question. "Do you think I'm still myself?" She hesitated. "Of course," she said. "Just a little tired." Tired. Always that word. I looked at my son. "And you?" He met my gaze steadily. "I think you've earned peace." Peace. Another soft word. Another explanation without edges. I nodded. That night, I dreamed again, but differently. I was walking through the house alone, touching the walls, the furniture, the small dents and imperfections that only I knew the origins of. Each touch made something disappear. A photo faded. A chair dissolved. By the time I reached the front door, the house was empty. When I woke, I felt calm, resolved. The next morning, I signed. There was no ceremony, no tension, just paper, ink, and quiet relief on their faces. My daughter hugged me, her body warm and familiar. "You did the right thing," she whispered. My son smiled. "We'll take care of everything." Everything. The word echoed, but it didn't frighten me anymore. I watched as they organized documents, made calls, adjusted schedules. I was no longer needed for decisions, only for compliance. The medication increased. This time I didn't resist. Fighting required energy. Suspicion required clarity. I let both fade. Days blended together. Conversations looped. Rooms felt interchangeable. Sometimes flashes of awareness cut through. Moments when I remembered the conversation, the calculations, the word accelerate. In those moments, I would look at my children and search for confirmation. Sometimes I thought I saw it. Other times I saw only concern. Which version was true? I stopped trying to decide. One afternoon, I overheard them again. I was sitting in my room, the door slightly ajar. My son spoke first. "He's calmer now." My daughter replied, "That's good." A pause. "Do you ever think—" She interrupted. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that he's comfortable." Comfortable. I closed my eyes. Weeks passed, or months. Time had become theoretical. A nurse began visiting regularly, then more frequently. I was told it was temporary. Everything was always temporary. One day I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a document I didn't remember receiving. It was a letter, official, polite, a notice about a care facility. I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't feel panic. I felt resignation. When my daughter came in, I held it up. "This says I'm moving." She smiled sadly. "We talked about this." I searched my mind. Nothing. "Did we?" I asked. She nodded. "You agreed. You said you didn't want to be a burden." A burden. I believed her, because it sounded like something I would say. The night before I left, I stood in my room and tried one last time to remember everything. Not details, essence. The feeling of certainty I'd once had. The conviction that something was wrong. It felt distant now, abstract, like a story someone else had told me. I lay down and waited for sleep. Before it came, a thought surfaced, clearer than anything in weeks. Even if I was right, it no longer mattered. The system had worked. The facility was quiet, clean, efficient. They took my belongings, my medications, my schedule. My children visited at first, then less often, then rarely. Each time they seemed relieved, as if visiting me reminded them of something unfinished. One day, a nurse asked me a question. "Do you have family?" I thought about it. "Yes," I said. "Do they visit?" I hesitated. "I think they already did." She smiled kindly. "That's nice." On my last clear day, if it was the last, I can't be sure, I sat by the window and watched people pass outside. I tried to remember my children's faces. They came to me in fragments. A smile, a voice, a hand on my shoulder. Love and calculation intertwined so tightly I could no longer separate them. Maybe I heard what I thought I heard. Maybe I hadn't. The truth slipped away before I could grasp it. And in that moment, I understood the final cruelty. Whether they had planned it or not, whether I had imagined it or not, the ending was the same. I had given consent.